Hi everyone, welcome to the second seminar that I'm going to do. This one is about tense. Last one was about auxiliary verbs, and the final one will be about articles. I think these are three very important topics for becoming an English teacher, as there are three areas that students make the most mistakes. Obviously, tense is a huge topic. You might even say that tense is the language, and all the other parts of grammar are really just parts of structuring tense correctly. But we're going to try and have an in-depth look at some common mistakes made in tense, using tense today, because obviously I can't cover every aspect of tense in this video. So I think looking at the kinds of mistakes that students often make will hopefully be useful for you. First of all, we're going to look at the different tense forms before going on to look at the types of mistakes that people regularly make. So in terms of any language, and in fact not just language but life, we have three basic time periods, and in language these are called the tenses. We have the past, the present, and the future. And basically, these three different time periods affect the way that we use language. However, that does not mean there are three tenses in English or in any other language. There are far more. That's really because we also have four basic tense forms. Now, some languages have different amounts and different types of basic tense forms, but most people agree, and this is a subject which is still open to some debate. Most people agree there are four basic tense forms in English. The three tenses are past, present, and future, but the tense forms are simple tense, is sometimes called basic tense. The continuous tense form, which is used for ongoing actions at the time of speaking. The perfect tense form, which is used to describe things which are or were true at the time of speaking. And the perfect continuous tense form, which is a mixture of the previous two. So we have four basic tense forms, and we have three basic time periods. So, as you might imagine, if you are good at mathematics, that makes 12 tenses. 4 tense forms for each tense period. And I know these are quite small, it was hard to fit them all into one slide, but these are the 12 standard tenses, I would say. So we start with the simple present tense, the most basic tense in the English language, where verbs are in their base form. I eat ramen. Then we have the present continuous tense, which shows an action that is ongoing at the time of speaking. I am playing soccer. and the verb takes the ing form. Please note that sometimes continuous tenses are called progressive tenses. Both terms are correct and both are accepted. I prefer continuous because I think it describes more clearly what this tense is used for, continuous actions. So we use the ing form of the verb with the be verb. So I am playing soccer. The present perfect tense is used to describe various situations, but generally it's used to describe either things, experiences that have happened in our lives, or it's used to describe recent past events which are connected to the present, which is quite difficult to understand. But this example here, I have been busy this week. So we can imagine from this that the week is not finished. This week is an open time period compared to last week, which is a closed time period. So the week is not finished, but the person is saying from the start of the week up until this point, I have been busy. Then the final present form is present perfect continuous tense or present perfect progressive. This describes an action that again started in the past and is continuing at the time of speaking. I have been playing soccer for 2 years, and again, continuous form, we use ing verbs. Next, we have the simple past tense, and the simple past tense is using the past tense form of the verb. And so the simple present was I eat ramen, the simple past I ate ramen. And every verb has a past tense form which needs to be learned in order to use the past tense. The past continuous tense is the same as the present continuous. We use the ing form of the main verb, but the be verb, the auxiliary verb in this sentence, takes the past tense form instead. So am becomes was. The main verb play stays the same. I was playing soccer. The past perfect tense, again, is very similar to the present perfect tense, but it's describing a period in the past, not in the present. So I had been busy that week. So the time that you're talking about is a period in the past, and you're describing what happened before that time. The past perfect continuous is again using the ing form of the verb. So for example, I had been playing soccer for 2 years when I met him. And we almost always include some other action in this tense form. So it describes an action and then a continuous action that started before that and was still continuing when the first action happened. So in this case, the first action is meet. I met him. And in the period before that meeting, the person had been playing soccer for 2 years. And at the time of meeting, they were still playing soccer. The simple future tense is I will plus the present tense verb form. So I will eat ramen sometime in the future. The future continuous tense, again, I will plus the be verb plus ing, main verb. I will be playing soccer sometime in the future. And again, this refers to another action. So if somebody said, would you like to go to a restaurant on Saturday? You might say, sorry, I can't. I will be playing soccer. So at the time of the other action, going to the restaurant, you will be playing soccer at that time. The future perfect tense is the same as the other perfect tenses. It's used to describe a period before another action or another time. In this case, Friday. So I will have been busy for 2 weeks by Friday. So Friday is in the future, but by the time the Friday arrives, this person will have been busy for 2 weeks before that Friday. At the moment, they have not been busy for 2 weeks. But by the time it gets to that Friday, they will have been busy for 2 weeks. The future perfect continuous is very similar, but it uses the ing verb to show that it's something which is continuing even into the future. I will have been playing soccer for 2 years this Christmas. So that is the 12 standard tenses. Or is that all the tenses? So I wanted to clear this up before moving on to the common mistakes and things like that, but it's worth remembering that all language is organic. By that I mean that it's alive, it's changing, and even though English has been around for hundreds of years, we still haven't agreed on everything, and because new words and new language, new patterns, new people use the language, it's always changing, and there are many things that were correct which will become incorrect in the future, but there are also things that people just don't agree upon, and you know, just like politics or religion, people have different opinions, and we can't really say one is correct and one is incorrect. You know, you can't say Christianity is the correct religion and Islam is the incorrect religion. You can't say a conservative right-wing party is correct and a left-wing party is correct, because it's opinion. And there are some people who say that the future tense is not a real tense. Some people say the only two tenses in English are present and past. They argue that the future tenses are all modifications of the present tense because they use the present tense verb forms with will or be going to. So I can kind of understand that, but I think it just makes more sense if we have a present tense and a past tense. I think it's better to have a future tense as well. It would be quite difficult to teach. There is only a past tense and a present tense. Because we have three basic time periods in human life, past, present, future, to say that in language we only have past and present but we can talk about the future using the present is very confusing for students. So I would recommend teaching that there are 3 time periods. But again, that's my opinion, and some people disagree. There are also other tenses that people say are real, and other people say they're not real. They're parts of other tenses. For example, some people say there are 16 tenses, not 12, because they argue the past future is another tense. So you would have the past future simple, past future continuous, past future perfect, and so on and so on. You can see an example here. I said that I would leave soon. So using the past tense to talk about the future. I think it's an important part of the English language, and I think it probably is its own tense, but I think there's something nice about saying that there's 12 because we have 3 time periods and 4 tense forms. Seems to make more sense to me. Other people say that there are modal tenses and conditional tenses and subjunctive tenses, various other things. But I'm not going to go into those today, especially because nobody can actually decide if they are really tenses or if they are just voices using other tenses. So maybe that's a topic for another video sometime. All right, so now let's look at some of the most common mistakes. And when I was thinking about what to talk about in this video, I kind of looked back on assignments. I thought about all the assignments I correct on Fruitful English every week, and I thought, what is the most common tense mistake that I have noticed? And it was a very, very clear and easy question to answer, and that is that the simple past versus the present perfect. And I think this is by far the most common tense mistake that English language learners make. And I think there are various types of mistake that people make, but I think that really the one that I see most often is using have when we don't need to use it. So in other words, an overuse of the present perfect tense. That is the issue here. So let's look at some examples. I have been to Tokyo yesterday. This is a big but. I went to Tokyo yesterday is a big maru. So the reason this happens, and the reason for a lot of tense mistakes, is time periods. And we have to think carefully about open time periods and closed time periods. Yesterday is a closed time period, always. Because logically, every time we say yesterday, yesterday is finished. It's always finished. We can't talk about yesterday until the next day, and therefore yesterday is closed. So when we talk about closed time periods, we should use the simple past tense. I went to Tokyo. I have been is used to show something which is continuing or connected to the present. And so using it with yesterday doesn't make sense. The next one, she has come back from Tokyo this morning. She came back from Tokyo this morning. I've just noticed, actually, that the Maru and bats are in the wrong place. Sorry about that, but yeah, this should be she came back from Tokyo this morning is correct, not she has come back from Tokyo this morning. Again, we talk about this kind of action after it's finished, and so there's no need to use the present perfect in this situation. It doesn't mean that it's wrong always, but because this morning could be an open time period. But I would say in most cases, she came back from Tokyo this morning would be correct. And the reason here is these time periods. So I have been to Tokyo is a perfectly acceptable sentence. I have been to Tokyo. She has come back from Tokyo is perfectly okay. But the problem is when we add yesterday or this morning or last week or last night and so on to these sentences, then we need to be much more careful about how we use them. So I just find that students tend to overuse have, has when talking about things. And a lot of the time, the present perfect is not required. The next one is present continuous versus present perfect continuous. Again, this is a very common mistake that I see all the time. So here we can see the example sentence. She is sleeping for 2 hours. And this is the present continuous tense. And she has been sleeping for 2 hours, which is the present perfect continuous. And this is correct. Why is it correct? Because if she is sleeping, then this is something that started in the past, because obviously she had to start sleeping in the past, and it's continuing now. She is sleeping. So for 2 hours doesn't make sense because we can't use the present tense is to talk about something that started 2 hours ago. So we need to use the present perfect continuous in this case to show that it started in the past but is happening now. She has been sleeping. She started sleeping 2 hours ago. She is still sleeping now. She has been sleeping for 2 hours. Another example, it is snowing all day. Again, exactly the same. If it started at the beginning of the day, which it must have done if it's all day, then we can't use is to describe it. It is snowing now is okay. But an action that started in the past can't use the is to talk about it. So it has been snowing all day. However, again, if we take out the time periods, these sentences are perfectly okay. She is sleeping, it is snowing, no problem. So the mistakes tend to happen when we think about these situations. She is sleeping. Yeah, she is sleeping. Okay. How long has she been sleeping? Oh, 2 hours. So she is sleeping for 2 hours. Incorrect. But again, this is a fairly common mistake. Next, we'll look at issues with future tenses, and in particular with will. So there are usually two clauses in a sentence. The clauses are the parts that make up a whole sentence. And we usually have a main clause and a subordinate clause. And we generally don't use will in the subordinate clause. Will should be used with the main clause to set the tense, and after that we use the present tense. And I guess this is one of the reasons why people argue that the future tense is not really a real tense. But anyway, let's look at an example. She will play soccer when she will begin junior high school. So the act of playing soccer and the act of beginning junior high school are both in the future. So they should both use will. Right? Wrong. The subordinate clause here is the begin junior high school clause, so we don't use will with that. It should be, she will play soccer when she begins junior high school. That is the correct form. So we just use the simple present tense with the subordinate clause. And just another example, very similar. They will help you if you will help them in return. Again, the subordinate clause is using will here, which is not correct. They will help you if you help them in return. So this is another extremely common mistake, I would say. Next, tense inconsistency. Now, this is I would say this is a very difficult thing to teach, because English tenses, by their nature, are inconsistent. The rules surrounding them are inconsistent. The rules of almost every aspect of English is inconsistent, and this is due to the fact that English didn't evolve in isolation like, for example, Japanese did. Japanese obviously was adopted from Chinese characters, but once that happened, it was completely isolated as a language, and it developed in Japan only. And so really the rules were quite straightforward, and there aren't too many inconsistencies in Japanese as a language. English is, to be honest, a terrible mess of a language. It's incredibly annoying as a teacher, and it's incredibly frustrating as a student to acknowledge this. But initially, English began as a kind of corruption of Saxon German or High German, when the Angles and the Saxons came to Great Britain, and this was further added to by Norman French when England was invaded by the Normans from northern France. In a very simple world, you could say it's a mixture of kind of ancient German and Old French, with some various other things, Latin and so on, mixed in, as well as old, British words, Celtic languages, Gaelic, and so on. So it's a complete mess of a mixture there, but this was only added to when, 1,000 years in the future, we have countries all around the world using English, and in the example of America, have been using English for hundreds of years, which has just led to all kinds of grammatical inconsistencies and problems. Tense inconsistency refers to changing tense suddenly in a sentence. I watched as the cat caught the mouse and picks it up in its mouth. So which word is wrong here? Well, it's picks. The tense is established by the first two verbs. I watched, past tense, simple. The cat caught, past tense, simple. And picks, the present tense. So it should be simple past tense as well. I watched as the cat caught the mouse and picked it up in its mouth. Generally, as a teacher, you want to tell students to stick to the same tense, be consistent with tense. She was playing with her friends, past continuous, and looks happy. So again, the tense is established by was playing, and looks is incorrect. She was playing with her friends. Now you might think it should be and was looking happy, which is possible, but this is where we start to see some problems, because actually she was playing with her friends and looking happy. We can use the was from playing to also affect looking. We don't really need to repeat the be verb here, but actually looked happy is also possible in the simple past tense. So already we're starting to see cracks in keeping a consistent tense here. And this is further displayed in the final example sentence. I didn't want to go to the party, but I went anyway. Okay, I didn't want to go to the party, but I went anyway. And we're going to talk about this use of did later, but you can see did is the past form of do. Then we have go in the present tense, and then we have went in the past tense. So it's a kind of a mess of tenses, but this sentence is correct. So as a basic rule, I normally tell people be consistent with tense, keep the same tense throughout the sentence. And I think in a way that's good advice, because it's very similar to mathematics, how we learn mathematics at school, in that we learn things when we are younger, like this is how we do this and this is how we do this. And then as we get older and we get more able to deal with more difficult topics, we are told, actually, what you learnt before is not exactly true. And you do it like this. And then later on, we learn again, well, that wasn't actually 100% true. But it's a way of teaching in stages, because to tell students at the start, tenses are virtually impossible and they keep changing all the time, even in the same sentence. Students will be bewildered and they'll probably want to give up straight away. So for beginner students, focusing on tense consistency is very important. And you can introduce sentences without a consistent tense later. Okay. Next, we have another common issue, which is the overuse of the continuous form. This is a difficult one because it's not wrong, but I would encourage students, particularly beginners, to try and keep sentences as short as possible. And overusing the continuous form leads to long, structurally complicated sentences, mostly because when we use the ing form, we always need to include a be verb somewhere. So you're adding an extra word compared to other verb forms. And it's just a lot of particles in the sentence which make it difficult. So for example, he was complaining because the children were moaning as it was snowing and they wanted to play outside. But we could really remove some of these. Maybe not all of them, but he complained. We can change the first one to the past tense. He complained because the children were moaning as it was snowing and they wanted to play outside. So I've removed two of them here, the first one and the last one, into the simple past tense. And the meaning of the sentence is the same, but it's shorter and it's easier to understand. Again, another example, she was singing while she was waiting for the bus. Can be written as she sang while she waited for the bus. There really isn't any need to use the continuous form in this sentence. And it makes a longer sentence. Again, it's not wrong. I just think that overusing the continuous form is overly complicated a lot of the time. And we want to try and make sentences simpler. Next, the past perfect tense. Now, this is not really a specific example of a common error. This is just the tense that I think people find most difficult. One of the main reasons is because it has three functions, which are all slightly different. So it's quite tricky to use. So the three main functions. Number one, to describe a finished action that happened before another past action. So we have two past actions. One is finished, and it finished before the other action happened. For example, when the bomb went off, the bombers had already escaped. We often use already with the past perfect tense. So the action, the past action that happened was the bomb going off. The action which happened before that was the bombers, the terrorists or whoever, escaping. And they had finished escaping before the bomb went off. So it gives us a good framework, kind of looking at when these actions happened in relation to each other. So it can be quite useful. Number two, we can describe an action that began in the past and continued up to the time of another past action. And this is basically the past perfect continuous form. When I reached the station, John had been waiting for 35 minutes. So when you reach the station, John is still waiting. That wait is now finishing this at that instant because you've arrived, so he's not waiting anymore. But the action of waiting continued right up until the other action happened, which is slightly different from the first example, where the action of escaping had finished before the other action happened. Finally, the third function is to talk about imaginary or hypothetical past action, kind of unreal action. For example, I wish I hadn't studied history at university. I wish I hadn't studied history at university. This person did study history at university, but they wish they had not studied history. So it's not a real action because they did study it. So had not study is not a real action. And these are the three styles, but I think these are among the most complex and difficult to understand sentences that we can use among any of the tenses. And so mistakes in the past perfect tense are very common. And I did say we were going to talk about this a little bit earlier, but verbs following auxiliary verbs. And this was when I was talking about tense consistency, I mentioned this. So when an auxiliary verb is used in a sentence, it's the auxiliary verb which takes the correct tense. The auxiliary verb's tense changes. The main verb's tense does not change. So one of the most common examples is using do in the past tense form did, often to ask questions. And since did is in the past tense form, the main verb remains in the present tense. But this is something that many people don't quite understand. The main verb seems to be the action of the sentence, so surely it should be in the past tense if you're talking about the past. But no, it's not. So did you cook the pasta? No. It's did you cook the pasta? And do you cook pasta is also fine. So when do is in the present tense, cook is also in the present tense. When do is in the past tense, cook is also in the present tense. And I think this confuses students that do you cook, present tense, okay, so did past tense, you cooked, past tense. It must be to be consistent, but it's not. So just another example of inconsistent verbs. Another example here, I did pass the exam. This time is not a question. We use I did like this to emphasize the action. If somebody said, you didn't pass the exam, you could say, I did pass the exam. The meaning is, I passed the exam, the past tense of passed. But again, since did is already in the past tense, the main verb stays in the present tense. So I did pass the exam is incorrect. Now, the last kind of common mistake I'm going to talk about this time is irregular verbs. I mean, this is more like verb conjugation than strictly tense, but it's because some verbs, some irregular verb, obviously regular verbs are fine. Usually it's quite easy to distinguish, or in many cases the past tense and the past participle are the same. So we don't need to worry. Even if we make a mistake, it still looks correct. But with the regular verbs, sometimes the past and the past participle forms are different, but very similar. And this leads to a lot of problems. So I think drink, drank, drunk, sink, sank, sunk is two of the trickiest ones to understand. Drink, drank, drunk in particular is difficult because drunk, the past participle, is already another word. A drunk is somebody who is an alcoholic, and being drunk is being affected by alcohol. So drunk is quite a common word, apart from being the past participle of drink. So I drunk a lot of beer last night is a very common mistake. This is the simple past tense, so it should be drank. But when we use the present perfect, I have drank. Excuse me. I have drank is not correct. In the present perfect, we use the past participle. I have drunk a lot of beer in my life. So that is another common mistake, mistaking the past form and the past participle form. Sink, sank, sunk is a very similar verb. So let's have a look at these two questions. The Titanic something after hitting an iceberg. Sink, sank, sunk. What is the answer? Well, the answer is sank. This is the simple past tense. The Titanic sank after hitting an iceberg. By the time any rescuers arrived, the Titanic had already what? Sink, sank, sunk. The correct answer this time is sunk. Had already. So this is the past perfect tense, and we use the past participle form. So these kind of irregular verbs can also cause trouble with tense because people use the wrong form of the word. All right. So that basically covers all the common mistakes involving tense that I could think of that students regularly make. So obviously these are things that if you're aiming to become a teacher, you're going to see a lot of, and you're going to have to correct a lot of them. And in order to correct them, you need to know why they are wrong, what are the reasons behind these mistakes. So hopefully this video today was able to help you a little bit with that, and you can use that knowledge in the future to help students yourself. All right, so thank you very much for joining my seminar this time on verb tenses, and I will be back again soon with the topic of articles, which is perhaps the most frustrating part of English for many students. So I'm looking forward to trying to make that easier. All right then, guys, thank you very much for joining me today. Take care and bye for now.